Chapter 11. New Worlds. One assignment for an entire career used to be a joke whenever Ezra found himself back at headquarters. A single, albeit sprawling, case that might just be smoke in the proverbial wind. That smoke stood next to him now, on a rubble-strewn sidewalk, begging Ezra for an arsenal. As Fade put it, they needed one of those movie montages where the good guys get all the awesome gear. He and Eve would then invade the grove, seemingly stick up the technological god sending aliens in piecemeal invasions all over the planet, and right the wrong. Ezra's phone, meanwhile, continued to buzz and ring with orders, demands for further details, and requests for his time. He was on the board, at last, noticed and needed, which gave the agent all the direction he could want. Not happening, Ezra said, noting Thalia and Mera continuing to discuss something off to the side. The morning's opening sun salvo transformed the downtown around them, cordoned off by confused cops, and turned what had been a dim wreck into a glittering, warming one. It's not like we even have cases of heavy weapons lying around to use at our leisure, but I'm not disobeying orders to let you two gallivant. Gallivant? You really using that word? Fade asked, while Eve just squinted at Ezra, as if she couldn't believe him. I'm telling you, this is easier than the other way. So much less red tape. What happens when this gardener kills you? How's it going to turn out for Earth when you skip to your other world and wind up perforated like the cowboy? That happens. Guess I won't much care about the consequences. Fade, Eve said. That's not the answer he's looking for. But it's an honest one, Ezra said, and it doesn't matter. You're not getting the weapons. What you are getting is a fast track with me to our local field office, where you'll sit us in a room for hours or days. Fade started to laugh, then looked back towards the reptile. Jaycee's still out there. My daughter Ezra. I need to go find her. You can, when we have a plan. I just gave you a plan. Get in the car! Fade eyed the wrecked sedan Ezra had smashed into the reptile. Think that one's out of commission, boss. And I've been in enough cars recently, thanks, Eve added. We're asking for the weapons because they'll improve our chances. If we're not getting them, then we're going to leave. Ezra dropped his cigarette, drew his gun from his shoulder holster. The move wasn't action hero speedy, but fast enough to make the pair blink. Ezra leveled the barrel at Fade, kept his finger on the trigger. That he'd never laid out a loser with a bullet didn't matter. You needed conviction to take a life, and after all these years, Ezra had plenty. Not a choice. Ezra nodded towards one set of police cruisers back along the street. We'll borrow one. Don't think you'll disappear either. Even if I can't shoot you first, your friend Thalia won't be following. This is such a bad move, Fade said. You could have been the good guy. Putting a Raker in a corner doesn't work out well. Eve took a step away from Fade, further onto the sidewalk, too far apart now for Ezra to clip them both in rapid fashion. Put the gun away. Tell your bosses what they need to know. You want to invade the grove yourselves? Find some Rakers to kill and take their badges. Thalia and Mera had noticed the standoff, stopped their conversation. Mera had her service weapon drawn now, too, covering Fade from Ezra's back shoulder. He shifted his own aim towards Eve. You can tell them that, and once they give you permission, you can throw your lives away, Ezra said. Now get... Eve darted, an up and under move that had Ezra lowering his weapon to keep the shot. Eve's hand shot out, grabbed the barrel and pushed the handgun aside. That wasn't surprising. What kept Ezra from pulling the trigger? What had him too puzzled in the moment was what Eve did with her right hand. She'd grabbed Ezra's own, laced her fingers through his, and took the man away. Well, that was a twist. Thalia blinked at the blank spot on the sidewalk where Eve and Ezra had stood a second ago. Fade, nearby, swore, as did Mera, both recalculating the next steps. Find us some weapons, Thalia said to Mera. We're not asking. Ezra's going to need help, because Eve just threw him into the mix with a whole bunch of murderous monsters. That changes the stakes. Can't, Mera hissed. It's not that simple. I can't say an agent's life is at risk, so here, give a couple of people with no clearance. That don't work for us, an arsenal. Even if I could, you think all this is a couple of blocks away? How far? Fade asked. Best option would be Oakland's police, their tactical response teams, which means you're convincing them, not me. That opportunity might come soon, as police continued to flood into the area. Even though more Rakers weren't popping out here, cleanup and the dead reptile creature ensured a strong presence. One that would note the odd trio standing amid broken glass and fallen bricks. The last thing they needed right now was another interrogation. If Thalia had to explain Rakers, the Grove, and all the implications to another person, she might lose it. New plan, she said, interrupting Fade's musing about how hard a raid to get that tactical gear might actually be. We go to Oscar. He'll have what we need. And want a piece of it? Fade said. A piece? Mera asked. The cost of saving the world, Thalia replied. A bargain for us. Mera, can you get a ride? You think you're leaving me? Then make your call, Mera, Fade said. Reach for those cuffs or that weapon. You're down 2-1 against a pair of badasses with nothing to lose. Or, you can get us one of those pretty police cruisers over there. We drop you on the curb a few blocks down, and you start prepping the good guys to repel an invasion. Two bad choices. Life's tough sometimes. Mera flicked a look between Fade, Thalia, and the flashing red and blue lights all around them, and swore again. Fade was true enough to his word, with Thalia pulling the co-opted cruiser. Mera's FBI credentials did the dirty work, aided by the general confusion, over to a pleasant curb in front of a coffee shop unmarred by alien marauders. Myra slid out of the shotgun seat, promised that she'd do what she could to keep the top brass informed, and left without further threat. Altogether, one of Thalia's kinder run-ins with the law. She knows, by the way, Thalia said as Fade joined her up front. They'll kill another Raker eventually and find a badge. So we don't have much lead time to shut this down. Shocking. Can we shut it down? Fade shrugged as Thalia pulled onto the highway heading westward, towards the hills and Oscar's secure house. Thalia, we've been up all night, in multiple fights, and I'm hungry as hell. Your daughter's missing, Fade. I get that, and damn if it doesn't make me want to scream, but what am I supposed to do? Panic? Fade shook his head. I know she escaped the Grove. Don't know where, and the only one who might is the idiot running that whole place. I want to get the gardener to talk. I'll have to make it scared. I'm sure Oscar's got the weapons for that, but you know what he won't have? What? Breakfast burritos. Refueled, Thalia swapped seats with Fade and made the requisite call to her uncle. Oscar answered with a stuffed mouth, a gruff greeting disintegrating in a flash once he realized who was on the other end. His niece, always with the goods these days. 5 minutes, Thalia answered to his question about just what, in heaven's name, was happening. Apparently catastrophes were emerging all over the planet, with live streams popping up everywhere with fantastical creatures wreaking havoc before vanishing into the ether. It's exactly what we didn't want to happen. We pissed off the big bad, and now it's taking us to the cleaners. Taking us to the cleaners? Since when did you talk like that? Since my life turned into a bad movie, that's when. Bad movie? Those don't make money unless they're so bad, they're good. Is this one going to make me money, Thalia? If you consider keeping yourself and the world alive good for your bottom line, absolutely. Those are the stakes, huh? Fade, listening on the car's speakerphone, rolled his eyes and picked up speed. Listen, Thalia said, we're heading your way. We need equipment, the kind that can kill something that might not be killable. You hearing what you're saying? Asking for ideas, Uncle. You're the best murderer I know. I am. And I think I do have an idea or three. You get yourselves here, and I'll have something for you. A breath. But it won't come cheap. Didn't I just tell you the world's at risk? Thalia, you want me to donate a grenade launcher to every quack saying the sky's falling? Convince me, and maybe I'll let you take it on loan. They bartered worlds as they walked through the dark. Daffodil asked Veronica about her wants, her days, her needs, habits and hobbies, interests and insecurities. Things Veronica wouldn't have told another soul back in San Francisco came easy with Daffodil in this deprived place, with its endless shadows, white bricks, and haunting mounds. Yet, despite the polite inquisition, Veronica hadn't quite lost touch with why she'd come here at all. Nor had she missed just who, or what, Daffodil might be. What about you? Veronica said, thrusting the question in at the end of her own answer, before the enigmatic woman walking at her side could form a reply. What's your favorite season? There aren't any seasons here. Sure, but you're not from here. Nobody's from here. I'm talking about back home. Daffodil's kind, if forgettable, face didn't change expression, offered no hints of internal struggle. She kept walking, and Veronica matched her as seconds crawled by. I don't know, Daffodil said. It's not a thing I've thought about in a long time. Well, it's pretty easy to figure out. Just start by describing the seasons, and then you'll find one with what you like most. I don't think I've ever had one. One what? A season? Exactly. This is, or was, who I am. This place, what your Rakers call the Grove, is where I have always been. Oh, come on! You're saying you, Daffodil, if I have you guessed right, the most powerful thing in the universe is stuck here? Veronica waved at the shadows, only thus because the stones beneath a nearby mound gave off their muted glow. Even if that were true, then why this place? Why does it look like a real boring stone? Infinity? Daffodil stopped. You don't like it? Not my taste. Daffodil laughed, a scratching sound, unlike anything a human might make. More like nails driven along a wooden board. Her mouth remained oddly open until the sound stopped, in a static pose. A puppet, maybe, whose puppeteer hadn't yet figured it out. Veronica stopped herself from flinching. The confused wonder she'd felt at Daffodil's appearance, the elation at not being alone in this alien world, had frosted into a cold calculation. This wasn't a dance, a dalliance, a lark before an end. This was an opportunity to forge the most powerful partnership the universe had ever seen. The Grove was here long before me, Daffodil said. It will carry on long after I give way to my successor. There's more of you? Of course, but we are an efficient species, all the universe's secrets deployed to our benefit, and as a result, we use our time wisely. By messing with other civilizations? I believe you mean guiding, saving, authoring the greatest charitable project of all. Daffodil resumed walking at the same languid pace as before. But I can tell you don't quite believe me, Veronica. Should I show you? Yes. A warning, then. This, to use one of your human phrases, requires pulling back a curtain. You will see things that you cannot unsee, and as a result, you will cease to be who you are right now. Veronica Pline will be a thing of the past, but your future will be bright. Daffodil smiled, again with an unnatural spread, her lips stretching wide. Singular. Another choice that wasn't one. Another decision with only one answer. Her father, Ellsworth, Lode, all loved giving Veronica these illusions as if she was too stupid to see them for what they were. Every time before she'd played along, whether to avoid conflict or to ease the way to something she desired. This time was no different. Impulse. Eve said impulse drove her to grab Ezra's hand and yank him here, to this pointless room with the fantastic air. The sheer euphoria of breathing did much to counterbalance the frustration. Yet Ezra still put distance between himself and Eve to level his weapon at her. "You keep calling this place the Grove, but I'm not seeing any plants," Ezra said as Eve raised her hands. "Not seeing any aliens either. Close walls. One door that's probably locked. You take us to a prison? It's always this way. The badges are locked onto an origin point for every species." "So this is what humans get." Ezra didn't dare look around the room to prove a point. "Doesn't think much of us then." "They're all the same. It's not personal. Whole damn thing feels personal." "Don't think that way." Eve nodded towards the door. "Putting human traits onto the gardener is a mistake. You'll be surprised." "Oh, can't be having that now." "I had to act, Ezra." "You weren't being reasonable." Eve glanced back at him, the gun following her moves, and smiled. "I had to give Fade and Thalia a chance." "To do what? Their idiotic scheme to come in here guns blazing?" "That's the backup plan." "For us?" Eve put her hand on the solid, if plain, wooden door. Ezra figured it wasn't real wood, from a real tree. The stones under his feet probably weren't rock-mined from anywhere either. Eve hadn't speculated much on just what made the grove, how it existed, but a look around gave Ezra some ideas. You don't do a lifetime of research on time-skipping, teleporting secret agents without getting deep into what may or may not be possible. "We're going to convince the gardener to let us live," Eve said, still listening at the door. "It'll either agree and end the fight, or it won't, and we'll have to win it." "Thought you said that was impossible." "Humans tend to laugh at impossibilities." Eve nodded at nothing, then pulled the door open. More stone beyond. "You coming?" "Not until you tell me what's beyond that door?" "Depending on our luck, death." "Eve, you keep talking like this and I'll plug you right now." "That'd be a waste of a bullet." Ezra considered, counted the 12 rounds in the weapon and an equal number worn on his belt. Eve had a point. Knocking her out would be all kinds of stupid, and even his basic instincts said Earth would benefit more from putting what ammo he had into an alien enemy than another human. Still, it had been a long night, and he'd left the cigarettes in the wreck of his car. The stone ring on the door's other side didn't do much to settle Ezra's nerves. Eve crouched, and Ezra followed her lead after taking a look over the edge. A pale green tail slithered out of view, explaining why Eve hadn't been quick to get them out here. "They'll kill us on sight," Eve said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "We'll have to keep to the shadows." "Thought this whole place was pretty open?" "I didn't say it'd be easy." Eve rose, glanced both up and down, then threw herself over the edge. Ezra watched her fall, slow, and walk off the platform. Did it sense her badge and stop Eve, making this a ploy that'd end with Ezra flattened across the bluish circle down there? Did it matter? If Ezra lost Eve, the end result would be much the same. So he flung himself over the edge after, trusting in the hard grip on his weapon and closing his eyes until his spread-out form settled into a floating stillness. "Move," Eve snapped. "Another Raker could come any second." Swimming his arms, as if he was stuck in honey, Ezra shifted himself forward and off the circle. He'd neglected to get his legs down, so his head and shoulders tumbled free first, right into Eve's arms. She lifted him up, pulled him to the side between the arches at the tower's base. Ezra stared over her shoulders into the darkness beyond. An ominous night. "There's nothing back there," Eve said. "Only remnants." "Of what?" "The other civilizations." "The gardener keeps a little from everyone it cleanses. I'm not sure why." Know who else keeps trophies from what they kill? Hunter's Ezra frowned at the dark. Sounds like your gardener's a bit of a psychopath. So what if it is? Eve tilted her head. How many gods and goddesses from human myths are the same way? How many of our vaunted leaders, through another light, could be seen as equally cruel and murderous? All progress requires sacrifice? Have to break a few eggs to bake a cake? I thought it was an omelet. Ezra shook his head. Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean it's right, but it's good to know we're not making deals with something sane. Just something that's scoured the known universe. Well, it hasn't scoured me yet. Let's hope it doesn't. Eve stepped from the arch, took another look up the tower's rising circle. Move, Agent. Every minute we burn, people are dying back home. Golden sunlight pierced Jaycee's closed eyes, sweeping away sleep's heavy fog. A look went fast to a squint, which confirmed her hopes were false. Not sun, but a close facsimile swung from rock above her. The disappointment didn't stick, with curious discoveries feeding in from her arms and legs. Soft and cool, Jaycee confirmed she lay on a mossy ground, flattened and a far cry from the science lab or operating room she'd been in before. The green puffy stuff ran in all directions for a few meters before hitting the brown and black rock wall. None of those pretty gemstones here. Also lacking were the headaches, the thirst in her throat and the rumbling in her stomach. Either the Zinwi had found a way to satiate her, or Jaycee was drugged up on something powerful. But she didn't feel woozy, seemed real in time and place. She'd had enough hits of good stuff back home to know what the alternative felt like. Her clothes were gone. Jaycee looked down at herself, connected the slight pressure on her chest, stomach, and legs with a loose blanket. A scratching sensation around her waist prompted a peek, and there sat what looked like a crude cloth diaper. Slight panic led to a quick search of herself, and relief, as she found no tears, cuts, or evidence of violations. She might be the alien here, but they hadn't ripped her apart. Yet. A knock rippled through the room, clear and sharp. Jaycee rolled, looked behind her, and saw a wide window. Glass, it seemed, was universal enough, and behind this sheet stood 3 Zinwi, all holding large slate devices, like the computer tablets back home, but with sculpted edges to fit into the 3-thumbed hands. The one who'd knocked did so again, and Jaycee considered. Without knives, with her body working, she had to put herself in context. This was a scene she'd witnessed in plenty of movies, read about in books. Only Jaycee was on the opposite side. The oddity to be researched and maybe befriended. The Zinwi had clearly kept her alive, put her in a room that had let Jaycee survive for a bit. First things first, Jaycee said, standing up and pulling the brown blanket around her. I need some real clothes, and if you're going to keep me here, a few upgrades. The Zinwi scrabbled as she spoke, writing with chunky black pencils, or pens. Jaycee couldn't see what they jotted, so speculation was the game. It was clear, though, that they didn't understand what she said. The Grove's miraculous translations weren't on offer here. Better find a different way, then. Jaycee tied the blanket like a makeshift bathroom towel, a move made difficult with the coarse cloth. The Zinwi textiles wouldn't be replacing cotton anytime soon, and approached the window. She felt those giant eyes gazing at her as Jaycee pointed to one of their tablets, tapped the window twice, then aimed at a big pencil before angling her finger back at herself. Please understand, Jaycee muttered as the Zinwi looked at one another. One left the window's view as the other 2 resumed scribbling. This close, Jaycee could see through the glass to the room behind, one lit by more of those gemstones. Hanging amid the stones, on flat boards, were what looked like images, X-rays and drawings alike. Jaycee recognized her body, her face and feet and hands pasted there. Her clothes, battered and dirty, lay sprawled on thin tables. One of her socks had been pinned up with scribbled notes around the ankle and toes. Jaycee breathed deep, long, slow, and tried to think of happier things. Taco nights with Thalia, her dad taking her on a drive to talk about teenage nonsense, sleepovers, and bad movies. Anything to deflect from what it felt like to be dissected. A click and a soft thud rescued her, a turnabout revealing a closing door made to resemble the stones. On the moss at its edge sat a tablet, and next to it, a black pencil the size of her forearm. Behind the window, the Zinwi kept on scribbling. Chapter 12. Fire. They'd made the agreement when Fade had moved in with her, long before the house. They'd sat down over a bad, boxed Cabernet in her small apartment. Fade, thanks to some poor choices and pursuing killers, was living out of his car at the time and set down the rules. The first, come to the rescue if called. The second, don't freak out if you can't help. Okay, maybe that wasn't the precise wording, but Fade clung to that meaning as he dug through Oscar's arsenal, one squirreled away in a huge armory beneath the equally huge garage in the man's estate in Oakland's eastern hills. Jaycee had disappeared to a place Fade couldn't get to from here, could only travel to from the Grove, and that only with the permission of its owner. If Fade couldn't help Jaycee, then he had to stop worrying about her. At least to the point where it drove away his rationality, his focus, his determination to turn the gardener and all those other Rakers to mashed blood and guts. Their arrival at Oscar's had been met with one question after another. Thalia's uncle had turned out his entire force to fulfill security contracts, as the strange creatures appearing on the TV were seemingly popping up anywhere and everywhere. Not just Oakland, not just California, but the world over. Oscar's clients had called and demanded protection outside their usual hours, and, sensing the windfall, Oscar delivered. "But I don't have enough personnel to keep this up forever," Oscar said as he led the pair down a wide concrete stair built, with a near-invisible sliding door, into the back of his garage. "And what's good for business today is going to get real bad if everyone panics, you know?" "Sorry, Oscar," Fade had replied. "What's good for your bottom line is way down on my list of concerns right now." "You wound me, Fade." "But what is at the top of your concerns?" "My daughter." Thalia took over from there, letting Fade get busy assembling his gear. He and Thalia had already agreed on strategy. She'd load up like some action flick caricature, bristling with more guns than any reasonable person should have, while Fade stuck to his bread-and-butter blades, fists, and feet. She'd clear the way while he went right for the big boss, hopefully doing up close what Lode had failed to do with bullets from afar. If that didn't work, Fade was clipping on a grenade array around the thick, armored jacket. He'd pull a pin and blow up with enough force to level a building, enough to render even the gardener to ash. All that, though, was second fiddle to a more complicated plan. Find a way to Jaycee and get her home. Then, the Grove could burn. "Ready?" Thalia asked, and Fade looked across the weapon racks and hanging armor to see his friend coated in bandoliers and magazines. 2 submachine guns rested on her thighs, 2 handguns in dual holsters over her shoulders, and, as Thalia did an awkward turn, a rocket launcher lay across her back. Spare ammo, including several rockets, covered every bit of her. Excessive, isn't it? "Can you even move?" "If I have to dodge, Fade, I'm dead. We'll just have to kill everything first." "Or scare them." Thalia settled a straight look Fade's way. "Don't say that." "They're killing us, Fade." The gardener declared war on Earth. "This isn't a mob boss intimidation. We're not keying some cars or leaving a note on someone's windshield. This isn't our usual, and I wish we had another 100 gun-toting killers backing us up. But we don't. I need you ready for anything." "Trust me, Nothing's going to hold me back. Hey, Oscar spoke up, near the stairs, watching. Any way I can help? Yeah, Fade said. You knock off any Rakers, search their bodies. Get the little jewels, then arm up and come after us. You got it, Oscar looked at Thalia. I know we haven't always been on the best terms, Thalia, but you get your ass back here. Don't want my best soldier dying on some alien rocks. Not planning on it. Thalia reached out, took Fade's hand. He hesitated, disappointed that his last look at Earth was a bunch of gear, cement walls, and soul-sucking white light. Guess he'd have to make it back. As strategies went, Ezra didn't love Eve's plan, especially the part about going right out into the open and drawing all the attention, now that approximately 200 creatures of a mix and variety physical and natural laws didn't predict were staring at him and Eve. The pair stood on broad steps outside the tower, having descended 2 and with another dozen more to go before hitting the courtyard proper. Deep blue tables at odd lengths and heights sprawled at the base, going left and right into the creamy horizon. A little like being immersed in a bowl of milk. The dizziness dissipated as Ezra held tight to his gun. The weapon grounded him, much as he hated to admit it. Eve commanded the attention. She stood apart from Ezra, seeming to grow tall in the spotlight with her arms out wide. She'd asked for an audience, and the Rakers obliged, albeit slowly, taking so many minutes to ooze away from those blue tables and assemble at the base of the steps. Ezra soaked it in, accepted the insanity piece by piece. "Rakers!" Eve yelled, her voice carrying far in a world without much ambient noise, with nothing more than a mild breeze made by unnatural air. "I have a question." The prospect of a person condemned to death along with her entire planet and species giving a speech to her would-be killers seemed pointless, but Eve had suggested her reputation would give her a chance, and Ezra conceded she'd been right. Despite the various writhing, horrible masses, some holding what looked like weapons of strange design, nobody advanced to devour Eve or blow her off the stairs. Instead, they turned eye, tentacle, antennae, and unknown organs towards her. "How many until it's your turn?" Eve asked. "You are all Rakers, tasked with keeping your species on a path decided by the gardener. We are chosen, it tells us. We have a chance, it tells us, so long as we do what it asks. Then, at some far-off point, we will achieve ultimate enlightenment. All we risk for this supposed gift is our annihilation. Why do we accept this trade? Why do we give up our worlds at the whims of a creature none of us understand? Earth, my human species, has been condemned for no other reason than letting others see some of the same knowledge all of us are supposed to guide our people to anyway. We've peeked behind a curtain, and now all of us, children and innocents included, must die. What enlightened, divine soul does this? Not one we can follow. Not anymore. If this were a human audience, Ezra would be hunting expressions. He'd spent time here and there on security details, when Raker evidence dried up, when important figures traveled to his area. Then it was a matter of prediction, scanning for signs amid the crowd that someone would break the wrong way. What did it mean when a snarling mass of blooming flowers and thorns slithered left instead of right? Or when a gelatinous orb with a dozen flagella changed colors from emerald green to ruby red? He wanted to tell Eve that this was impossible, but she wasn't done. She wouldn't be done until the gardener showed up. Having delivered her opening, Eve descended into specifics, rattling off other condemned species like a prosecutor recounting all the hideous acts performed by a defendant. She wove in asides about the gardener's arbitrary restrictions, wondering why the being prevented species from interacting and sharing knowledge, why none of them knew their locations relative to each other across the universe, how the grove could be a benevolent meeting place, rather than a motley base to dispatch hitmen at the gardener's whim. An impressive series of arguments all around, and one's burning clock. At the far back, Ezra noticed the portal. The silver circle spun up to show a busy city street. Too far off to tell what city, which street. But while Eve spoke, no Raker dashed through it. She was, at least, buying some time for Earth to get its bearings. Until she coughed. The pause gave opportunity, one filled by those flowers and thorns. It spoke with a buzzing melody, the thorns scraping against one another in precise, plinking scrapes. It should have been nonsense, but the meaning flowed through Ezra's ears all the same. You might be right, Eve, but we don't have a choice. We do as the gardener says, because to do otherwise means our deaths. We cannot oppose it, so we must obey. You and the humans must die. Any hope Ezra held at the power of speeches faded in the next second, as other Rakers roared, mewed, rustled, and sang their agreements. Weapons raised and creatures surged forward towards the steps. Ezra aimed his own pistol, as sure as anything he was about to be slaughtered 1,000 different ways. A harsh flash lit up the courtyard, and a blazing missile flew past his shoulder, soaring by to land well past the Raker horde and crash into the stones near the portal. Rocky chunks flew up. Smoke and burning fuel filled the air. "Move another meter, and the next one's on target," Thalia announced from the top step, with Fade standing at her back sliding the next rocket into the launcher. "This war ends now." The mounds had disappeared, and with them, the little light. Daffodil's voice and the occasional touch of her hand on Veronica's arm guided her amid a darkness so pure she had no sense of where she was, how fast they were walking, or how far they'd gone. A steady, calm breeze confirmed they hadn't fallen away from reality completely. But beyond that, Veronica had nothing save her words. Daffodil opened like her namesake, with slow and careful verbal riposts drawing out details. She and her fellows had existed since the universe's dawn, exploding into existence at the same moment as matter itself. Fumbling eons brought about a slow climb to interstellar mastery, and, from there, to conquering life's many ills. Disease, age, disaster faded in tandem with the same things that made life worth living. As they muddied about in search of anything to do, Daffodil's comrades began to seek a more permanent oblivion. "You're the last one?" Veronica asked. "After all this, you're it?" "The last one awake," Daffodil replied. "I'll bring what remains of our grand civilization back when there's reason for it." "What's that reason?" "Another species on our level, that's what. New partners, friends, and discoveries to pursue. Without that, we would simply relapse into the same fatal malaise that nearly destroyed us." Daffodil gripped Veronica's arm hard, then. "Unfortunately," Daffodil continued, her voice changing from wistful to warlike, "for all our prowess, we have yet to discover how to be in two places at once. There is a problem back at the Grove that I have to deal with. Will you wait until I come back? Do I have a choice?" "No." The cold delivery of that last had Veronica try to withdraw her arm, but Daffodil held tight. A line appeared, drawn by Daffodil's hand, in the dark before their faces. A fiery white, sparking, though the embers seemed to have no heat. The line grew until it reached the stones at Veronica's feet and exceeded her head. Daffodil shifted her free hand and pulled at the line, peeling back the darkness in the same way Veronica might peel a banana. On the other side waited a creamy expanse, much like what Veronica had glimpsed outside the tower, way back at the Grove. "In you go," Daffodil said, her hand leaving Veronica's arm to give her a push. Veronica flew, the push knocking her breath out and sending her through the seam into the white beyond. Her momentum stalled out fast, as if plunging into a pool, though Veronica felt no water on her skin. Nor did she feel a floor beneath her feet. Instead, She came to a rest amid nothing, the air thick enough to hold her aloft on its own. She tried to kick, tried to wave her arms, but the motions brought her nowhere. Like those videos of astronauts in zero gravity, Veronica seemed to be stuck. "I'll return," Daffodil promised to her back. "Someday." Veronica twisted, looked over her shoulder, and started to say wait when the splitting line closed. As it did, the infinite expanse around her shivered, shapes coming into definition. She wasn't the only one here. More faded in around Veronica, as if her eyes were adjusting to new light. Rows upon rows, each one sitting still amid the white, stuck and alone. She saw creatures of all kinds, plants and beasts, things that stood such as it was, on 2 legs or scrabbled with 1,000. All unmoving despite their efforts, though most Veronica saw weren't trying in the slightest. What was this? A zoo? How long would she be here? A cold settled into her stomach. Veronica thought she'd had nothing to lose, but she might have been wrong. For all Fade's illustrious career, the rocket launcher had been seen, not heard. A tube deployed when intimidation could remove danger, prompt the right cash to change hands. It was not meant to be fired, as any explosion would attract the wrong attention, and was like as not to obliterate the wrong people. The shells, too, were so expensive as to make shooting the damn things a poor business move. But boy, oh boy, was that explosion cool. The Grove's stone tiles hadn't been made with artillery strikes in mind, and they shattered, sending rubble flying. Fade was far enough away that he only felt the heat brush his cheeks, kept his balance as the mildest tremor ran through the step beneath his shoes. But he whistled all the same. The rest of the Rakers, those motley creatures bearing a bad drug trip's collection of colors, appendages, and sizes, seemed stunned. Thalia's proclamation and its undeniable awesomeness aside, these were hardened adversaries, and Fade found himself a tad nonplussed. Surely these Rakers had faced problems, enemies, or disasters matching a single launched rocket in their all-too-long lifetimes. "Bold," came the booming words at Fade's back, answering the question and prompting the fixer to whirl. The gardener, in its usual vaguely humanoid gray metal swirl, drifted behind them. "I have never, not once, seen a something like that used in my grove." A fitting conclusion to a chaotic species. The gardener expanded, a cloud growing larger than Fade, Thalia, and Eve combined. To say nothing of the utterly baffled Ezra, the poor agent holding on to his sidearm like it was a life preserver. That she would deploy something so dangerous here, where it might destroy the only chance all of you have to guide your species to the ultimate enlightenment, should be all the reason you need to destroy these humans, both here and on their world. The gardener shifted the bulbous, eyeless head to look towards the Rakers. "I understand the hesitance, so I will add to your incentives. Earth, the human's home, is only somewhat spoiled, with much life and riches left. The Rakers that do the most to remove this scourge will have the opportunity to relocate or reseed your own people. A chance to renew, and one several of you could sorely use. In another time, in another context, Fade might have quibbled with describing Earth as somewhat spoiled, but in that moment, on those steps, the idea that the gardener was pitching his home as a bonus for anyone willing to get extra murderous hit real wrong. "Blow up the bastard," Fade said to Thalia, who'd already turned around with the launcher up and aimed. "My pleasure." Thalia pushed the trigger, sending the next rocket flying. It crossed the few meters between them and the gardener, a distance close enough that Fade and his friends might have been blown up too. But a win was a win. Fade, though, wasn't surprised when the rocket passed through the gardener much like Lode's bullets. The burning projectile sped right on into the tower behind, blasting into the outside and sending stone blocks spilling down across the entry arch. Neither Fade nor Thalia let the disappointment keep them down. As soon as the rocket launched, Thalia had dropped to one knee and Fade had swept up the next, and second to last, rocket to stick down the tube. The gardener took the attack as an invitation, ringing out an order for the Rakers to kill them all. The command put the 4 humans up against what seemed like 100 alien Rakers. Fade figured the rest had deployed to Earth or were on their own planets. The grove never seemed all that crowded, odds that listed among the worst Fade had faced. To beat them, they'd need a plan, and Fade had one. "Breakthrough!" Fade shouted, wheeling away from Thalia's launcher and ripping smoke grenades off his belt. "The portal's our only shot." "We're with you," Eve called back, as Thalia aimed the rocket at the Raker line. A mass of tentacles, arms, legs, blobs, and worse. "Lead!" Turning their back on the gardener might have been a bad move, but Fade had yet to see the thing hurt a fly on its own. Thalia took the lead, stepping slow with the launcher aimed and ready. The Rakers chilled their charge as death stared them down, then began pulling back. "They're not retreating," Fade said, matching Thalia as Eve and Ezra closed in on the left. The foursome kept their line as they hit the stair halfway point. "They'll circle us, bank on getting too close for the rocket to work." "I could fire it?" Thalia asked, taking the next step with yet more care. Behind them, the gardener again exhorted the Rakers to act. "Blow up a bunch?" "No," Eve answered. "I can't accept they're all buying what the gardener is preaching." "They listened to me, Fade. The Rakers aren't stupid. But if we act like the monsters the gardener says we are, then we're lost." "I'm not into the martyr thing, Eve." "One tentacle touches me. I'm launching the rocket." "You won't have to," Fade said. "I'll clear the way. You all make the portal." "I said it. You follow." The smoke grenade offered itself as an interesting little object, imbued with a chemical mixture Fade neither knew nor seriously thought about, until right that moment, the hand-sized charges snapped off his belt with a light tug. Using his teeth, a technique best avoided if one cared about dental health, Fade bit first one ring and then a second, all the while stepping ahead of his colleagues into the encroaching horrors. He tossed one ahead to the right, another to the left. Perhaps because the rockets gave evidence of humanity's explosive potential, the Rakers shied away. No, more than shied. Outright turned and scuttled, drifted, or loped to put meters between themselves and the would-be bombs, which clued Fade into the gardener's real power. Its Rakers wouldn't dive on bombs for the gardener, wouldn't throw their lives away with certainty for the creature's cause. Another wedge they could hammer later. Much later, when Fade and his pals weren't about to get eaten, chopped up, or melted by alien spit. "Run!" Fade called, as the smokes outed themselves, spewing white fluff into the air. Fade himself kept the lead, ripping off his final smoke grenade as he bounded down the steps between his leading smokers. He threw this one out ahead, smacking it off a retreating Raker. The black grenade bounced to the ground, blew out smoke, and created a narrow avenue to the portal. The path was there, but Fade had to get the door pointing to the right spot, and that meant the audience. Would it even listen to him anymore? Behind Fade, Eve, Ezra, and Thalia hoofed it. Running with a launcher the size of her arms wasn't exactly easy, but Thalia made the awkward acrobatic by pulling the launcher down and raising it back up between steps. As if pursuing an odd workout routine, Thalia's interesting choice flickered a deadly shadow amid the smoke, and kept those cautious Rakers at a tentative bay. Nobody wanted to swallow that last shell. Ezra and Eve traveled in Thalia's wake, Eve lifting a machine pistol off of Thalia's waist and pointing it at any Raker not sufficiently scared by the rocket. Ezra's composure seemed less confident, the man spinning with his steps as if expecting a tentacle attack from any angle. Considering where they were, that supposition wasn't a bad one, especially as the gardener exhorted its rakers to attack en masse. "They can't shoot you all," the gardener boomed, its voice covering spectrums, shaking the ground, blowing in the air, and pulsing like a bad hangover in Fade's head. "The humans are a threat to everything you want. Don't let them take your dreams away." A bit dramatic, but Fade swallowed his critique as he broke left. The humans' table and its attendant audience were a few sets away, and between that sapphire rectangle and Fade stood, floated, or oozed at least 5 other Rakers. With the smoke sprawling at his back, Fade picked up speed, kicking off the stones and hoping his friends would just keep going straight no matter what. Eve and Ezra would probably be fine writing Fade off, as much as that hurt to realize. But Thalia? Didn't matter now. Fade cleared the smoke, and the first thing loomed before him, all twisting vines, thorns, and puffy yellow flowers. "Move," Fade ordered, drawing a combat knife and angling the blade. The Raker did, right at him. Chapter 13. Trading Places. Mara hadn't put pen to paper for her memoirs yet. She figured those were a few decades down the road. But the whirlwind she was listening to would surely deserve its own chapter. Unfortunately, the setting wouldn't make for much, as she sat in a stiff chair in a staid conference room. The placid brown table for 12 counted only her, a coffee mug, and a speakerphone. A screen at the far end showed a more populated spot on the East Coast, either the Situation Room in the White House or some secure spot in the Pentagon. Mara wasn't sure which, as nobody had bothered to explain. At least not to her. After Fade and Thalia had dropped Mara on their way to the suicidal raid on the Grove, Mara had made the most intense series of phone calls in her life. First to her direct superior, and Ezra's lone boss, the FBI director. That call went on a number reserved for agents on particular assignments, a number that'd roll over to ever more high-ranking individuals until someone with the power to launch a nuke picked up the phone. Mara, thankfully, wound up with the director, and soon after found herself isolated in the conference room. Another armed agent stood outside the door, ignorant of what was going inside, but with the clear instructions not to let another soul in. She'd owned the first 10 minutes of the meeting, speaking to curious, incredulous faces about why strange creatures were popping in around the world. For an improvised speech, Mara thought she'd done rather well, and perhaps the fact that she'd been utterly ignored ever since was a testament to her prowess. All the boxes had been checked, no need for more. Until the faces turned back to her, suits and uniforms, glasses and glares alike. "These badges," the director began, her voice as composed as her straight shoulder stance, folded hands, and hard eyes, "can be found on any of these invaders?" "Small jewels." Mara nodded. "I don't know how they work, but they open the path back to the Grove." "How many would we need to send a small force? Do you want me to guess?" Mara hated asking the question, but Ezra had always told her to be as honest as possible with higher-ups. Making bets and coming up bad-ended careers. "Please do. From what I saw, a single badge can work for more than one person, provided they are in physical contact. I only saw hands held, not palms on shoulders, or ropes, anything like that." The group ran with that information, turned back to each other for more heated discussion. Mara sipped her coffee and listened. Realized this was what it felt like to be in the room, to be present as power exercised itself. The adrenaline shivered, began to dwindle as talk turned from high-level action to minutiae, to which nation could get badges first. What if an enemy acquired some? Could they go to the Grove and harvest its high-level tech before America or another ally? "They won't," Mara said, almost without realizing it. Again the faces turned towards her, and she fought off a blush. This was her moment, and damn being nervous about it. I'm sorry, but unless we're wildly wrong, this isn't an opportunity. This is a superior enemy that has decided we, and by we, I mean everyone on this planet, every single human doesn't deserve to live. The gardener wants to wipe us out, and I believe it has the means to. And why do you believe this? The director asked. Because of its threats? Because the Rakers have done it before. One of our own did. She wouldn't lie. Your recommendation, then, is that we treat this as an absolute fight for our survival. The director nodded at the camera. I happen to agree. From what we've seen, these haphazard attacks around the world don't come close. They don't make sense unless as a distraction. Feints. Then we go with the original plan, said another man, military. A rank Mera ought to know, but the long night and, alien invasion made mockery of her memory. Get the badges, send in a tactical team. You said, Agent, that the Grove isn't large? I've never been, sir. But I get the impression it's not very big. Then we strike fast. Try to secure the area as best we can, and maybe escape with some of what makes the Grove work. Then we make the call on a second team. That one goes in big. A tactical nuclear device. If we can't take the Grove, we destroy it. Murmured assents around the room. Chairs began to push back, phones lifted up to make plans permanent. What about Ezra? Mera asked. And the others already over there? If this is a war for our species, the director said, standing, then their losses, while regrettable, can't be counted against saving all of us. She flattened into a tight smile. Get some rest, Mera. You and Ezra did well. Let the soldiers do what they're trained to do. Running with a rocket launcher, the tube almost a meter long, wasn't something Thalia practiced on the daily. Keeping the thing at a threatening level while making her way fast down broad steps and surrounded by thrashing, gnashing aliens was a test she was bound to fail. Because, Thalia wanted to shout, look at these things, these Rakers. Fade and Eve had suggested that biology took some strange turns, and Thalia had seen some evidence of that in Oakland's downtown. But the collection opposing her now was more than ugly. Consider, a tiny voice whispered, as Thalia wheeled the launcher to her right, its end scaring off an encroaching pair of beetle barrel blends. Life would match its origins. Gravity, biomes, predators, and so on would drive all the misshapen monstrosities around her. Monstrosities, that same voice added, that might see Thalia in the same ill light. A barbaric offense to every other Raker in this place. Left, Thalia, Eve ordered, the woman ducking Thalia's turn and the launcher tube swinging with it. Forward. The Raker kept her voice calm, as if calamities like this were dealt with every Tuesday and twice on Thursdays. Eve seemed to take her plan's failure and the gardener's commitment to cataclysm as a mere setback. She aimed the borrowed machine pistol straight ahead, keeping a path clear to the portal without firing a shot. Beyond, the gardener called out again for an attack, but the alien seemed to misjudge its own forces. Not a one felt the need to end its life against the humans. But then why jump through the portal to attack Earth? A known threat against a hypothetical? Keep moving, Eve said, providing ballast against the chaos. Fade's smoke did the same, though the grenades were already dying. The Grove's consistent breeze did them no favors either, giving more Rakers clean sight lines. Thalia's experience said they needed to find cover quick. Some sort of defensible position, or the first brave enemy would send the whole batch at them from all sides. The portal, too, wasn't close, at least at launcher speed, which, perhaps, was the answer. I'm going to fire, Thalia said as Ezra and Eve, forced by the dissipating smoke cover, closed in. We need to go faster, and this thing isn't helping. You kill them? They'll kill us, Eve replied. Not a good thing, Ezra added. Yeah, got that, but we need to move. Thalia had her choice of targets. In between their trio and the portal sat a solo, purple box-like menagerie of stilted limbs. Some bent at odd angles to lift the creature's core off the ground, while others angled towards the sky, small blue tongues flicking from the ends as if tasting the air. Ugly enough to be worth a blast. The Rakers to her left and right, including those beetles, weren't much better. But Thalia didn't blast any of them. Instead, she angled the launcher upward and fired towards the infinite cream sky. The missile sped on, drawing eyes, antennae, and flagella after its trail. Thalia dropped the launcher, snarled run, and burst towards the portal. Eve and Ezra took the advice and matched her, the trio drawing right up to the boxy creature. That Raker, whether because it had no eyes Thalia could see or just kept a fanatical devotion to duty, ignored the missile and its explosive destiny to swipe at her. The first limb came from overhead, lashing down with its shelled length like it meant to hammer Thalia to a very brief and fatal end. If Thalia hadn't come into close contact with life-ending events on a regular basis, she might have been paralyzed at the ferocity. She might have flinched or stared, wide-eyed, as death turned her head into a mashed melon. Instead, the swipe fell into a list of attacks she'd dodged, countered, or otherwise defeated, slower than a martial arts snap kick and faster than a drunk's lumbering punch. For this one, Thalia used the long knife. Snapping her right hand to her left thigh, crouching as she reached, Thalia drew the blade and swept it up. Not a blind swing, no, but one aiming right the thin connection between chunky links. Her aim was true. The blade's sharp edge, Oscar was nothing if not meticulous about the quality of his gear, scythed right through the creature's gristly cherry muscle, and the limb's last third bounced off Thalia's shoulder. A sweet-smelling splash soaked her, followed by a rippling, keening noise as the monstrous Raker scuttled back. Its wounded leg flailed, the limb's siblings seeking to carry away the body from the dastardly humans as fast as possible. Behind it, the silver portal sat open and waiting. Only Thalia saw no exit on the other side, no window back home or anywhere else, a clear view through. More Rakers found courage, pressing in with the launcher's absence. Eve triggered a few rounds, spraying bullets over heads, still playing pacifist. Ezra was as white as any sheet Thalia had ever seen, swiveling his handgun from one target to the next, but not pulling the trigger. Discipline held for the moment. Whether it'd last another depended on Fade. Combat training came naturally to a kid dropped into after-school karate 5 nights a week, and both Saturday and Sunday. Fade's parents had stuff to do, and he seemed to like hitting things, so the dojo became his second, and eventually his first home. He learned and taught in the serene setting of mats and padded floors, polite opponents and strict rules, all of which were thrown out the door when the dojo's sensei asked if Fade needed a little extra cash. Fade spent the next few decades earning dough, refining techniques that could get him out of almost any jam. Techniques that were utterly unfit for the plant mass, sending its thorny vines Fade's way. The spiky bits were as large as Fade's thumb, and their pale points caught the ambient cream light as they streaked in from both sides and above. At their base rested a puffy yellow cluster, dotted with flowers that might have been pretty if death wasn't drawing Fade's attention. He flung the knife, a wrist flick sending the blade straight to spear the yellow puff. Those vines reached him, thorns making their inroads through Fade's thick jacket and his heavy pants designed to ward off bladed assaults. A test of human make against alien murder, and this time, the humans came out ahead. The thorns skipped off as Fade followed his flicking strike, the ends only glazing. The same could not be said for Fade's knife, which flew true and pierced the target with a golden pollen splash. Those closing vines whipped in a frenzy, one buffeting Fade's head and drawing a thin red line along his neck. The accident and its burn wasn't enough to slow Fade down as he reached the creature's center, shot out with his right hand to hit his thrown knife's hilt and shove it deeper. A gray rot appeared at the impact's point, spreading as the Raker shivered, flailed, and ignored its adversary. Good enough. Fade abandoned the knife and cut to his left, ducking beneath two whipping vines into a sudden clearing. Audience tables aligned before him in their neat rows, his target a couple columns away. The other Rakers hadn't noticed their ill-fated friend yet, distracted by Fade's own pals. A clean shot at salvation, and Fade took it. The sapphire table didn't resist Fade's command, a suspicious relief as the swirling sapphire rectangle confirmed the portal's setting. Right back to Oakland, back to downtown. He'd considered bravura plays like Washington or London, or wherever the UN met these days, but better to go home and reset. The gambit had failed. Easier to devise a new strategy at home. "You think you'll get there?" said a bemused voice, without accent or scars, the sort of thing a hapless computer might come up with. Fade pulled a second knife and whirled, slashing the blade through the amorphous gray behind him. The gardener took the hit without complaint, letting the knife glide through its mist-like body, the would-be skin sealing right back in place. "Please," the gardener continued, "don't waste my time any more than your awful species already has." "Then kill me already." "I plan to, but perhaps not yet. A trade." "A little late for that, don't you think?" Fade risked a glance to his right, past the swarming alien masses towards the portal. The silver ring was spinning up, its center filling with a familiar image. He couldn't make out Thalia and the others behind the surreal horde, but from the slow motion, it seemed like they were moving. "Never," the gardener said. "You want to go home. You want your friends to survive. I will let you, in exchange for the man. The scared one." "What?" "Give him to me, and you are free to go." The gardener's gray cloud rippled. "We will chase, of course. The war will continue. But you will have your chance, and your daughter will not lose her father." Certainty, cold and clear, leveled with the last line. It wasn't a guess, and Fade had no surprises left to get him out of the grove, past this killer creature. Damn Ezra so Jaycee could keep her dad? A hero might take a different path, but Fade wasn't a hero. He'd tried that game with Eve, played at being a Raker, and found himself right back here, making comprises to survive. Fine. "Done," Fade said. The gardener's gray rippled again. The cloud swam over Fade and he shut his eyes. A chill came with it, one that left a moment later. The portal stood before him, a few steps away. Thalia and Eve, shouting, came up at his back. Fade spun, saw Ezra had vanished. Saw, too, that Thalia and Eve hadn't noticed yet. Behind them, the Rakers slowed, their task failed, and not worth risking a bullet wound for. "Come on!" Fade shouted. "Before it closes!" The pair sprinted by, Thalia grabbing Fade's shoulder and pulling him along home. Ezra did not appear at home. He did not, in fact, appear anywhere he recognized. One moment, he'd been stumbling after Thalia and Eve, his moves tripped up by the sheer chaos everywhere around him. An onslaught of impossibilities Ezra couldn't piece together, as if every nightmare and dream had merged into a frenzy dedicated to ending his life. There'd been the gray, a fuzzy gray all around him. His stomach fell as all depth perception disappeared into the infinite slate sea. Ezra looked at his hand, his feet, and saw neither, though his touch suggested he still held his service weapon. The thought came to pull the trigger, but what would that solve? For a minute, maybe two, Ezra drifted in the ether. Had he died, maybe? The nothingness around him resembled the purgatory tales he'd heard growing up, a void to float in until God judged you. A grim idea that spiraled, sucking Ezra down one wild theory, Had God created the grove? Was the gardener the Christian God after all this? After another? Until the gray fell, revealing the same white cobblestones, the tables at sizes and heights too big and small for humans. The burbling mass of Rakers split apart in the distance, pairing off and splintering to their own ends. Thalia, Fade, and Eve weren't in sight. Escaped, hopefully. A woman stood before him, casual, clean, and calm. She smiled, and Ezra snapped back. Decades reading people picked out oddities fast. Teeth too straight, skin too smooth, eyes too focused, like one of those computer-generated people from earlier movies. "Call me Daffodil," the woman said. "It's going to be easier that way." What's going to be easier? Ezra would have expected his throat to be dry, his nerves fried after what had just happened, but the grove's invisible magic had him fresh, as if he'd just woken from a nice nap. "What did you do?" "Your friends are gone, and the Rakers are back to their normal routines, excepting, of course, continuing the destruction of your species." Ezra whipped up his weapon, put the barrel right to Daffodil's forehead. She didn't move, kept that same too calm smile. Pointless, then. He'd seen how Thalia's rocket did nothing to the gardener. Better keep the rounds for when they might be useful. "Getting ahead of yourself," Ezra said, lowering the gun. "Humans don't die easy." "So I'm gathering?" A pesky bunch Daffodil turned aside, waved ahead along the infinite cobblestones. "Walk with me, Ezra." "Why?" "Why not? You don't have other options, save defying me until I decide you're too frustrating, at which point I'll have you mashed into an organic jelly. There are quite a few Rakers that would delight in slurping you up like a smoothie. How did you learn to talk like that?" "With our words?" Daffodil chuckled, and when she started walking, Ezra matched her stride. The gardener had a point. Ezra wouldn't help home or himself by getting annihilated, but he might learn a little by keeping the gardener talking. The biggest leaps any civilization can take are when they meld the organic with the opposite. Limitations vanish, flexibility remains. Languages and how to use them are just routines. I pick the ones I need, leave the rest for another time. Daffodil winked at Ezra. "If you paid attention, when I'm talking to all the Rakers in all their tongues, my words are simple. Instructions basic. Only so much meaning you can spread across such a large surface. When it's just you and I, however, I can play." "That makes more sense than the rest of this place." "The Grove?" A simple reality, constructed to make sense across all manner of peoples. Most civilizations understand a tower, understand rock and stone, tables, and the like. The rest comes with time. Another chuckle. "Learned that one with a lot of trial and error. The earlier groves, my goodness, they were disastrous. So many lost due to my mistakes. But then, it's all paid off, hasn't it?" "You're trying to obliterate my people." "So I'd be inclined to disagree." "Ah, well, there's always going to be losers. Speaking of, I'd like you to help me with that. Destroying your people, that is. I gather, from what I've seen of you, that you might have some good ideas on how to do that?" "Destroy us? My own people?" Daffodil pointed a single finger at him, squinted her eyes like he'd made the perfect joke. "Exactly. For most, I'd just blast the planet into dust, but Earth is quite nice, with plenty of time left to give another species a shot. So, wipe away the humans, keep the nice oceans and forests, and see what happens next." Obviously, I'm going to say no, even if I had an idea. Yes, of course you would. And I commend you for your loyalty, misguided as it is. Instead, let me tell you why you'll tell me what I want to know. Daffodil stopped, put a hand on Ezra's shoulder. "If you do this, I will keep a small part of humanity alive. Forever. Choose, Ezra. Now." Chapter 14. Fantasyland. You'd think Thalia would be getting used to this. Aliens, teleportation, rocket launchers. The norms weren't the norms anymore. That logic didn't help as the Grove's white stones disappeared, and Oakland's battered downtown replaced them. A solid sidewalk underfoot, the cream horizon swapping to steel towers. Sirens filled in for the psychic tremors issued by 100 different aliens talking. The noon sunlight refracted off glass broken and not, the breeze bringing with it dust and dirt unmoored by destruction. Emergency crews swarmed, though enough time had passed that the people scurrying by the alleyway into which Thalia, Eve, and Fade had been deposited were less officers and paramedics, more construction workers hauling away debris. The renewal underway even as the interstellar war continued. Nothing like human commitment to the economic cause. "He's gone," Eve said, looking around next to Thalia. "You didn't see Ezra come through, did you?" "He wasn't there with us at the end," Thalia replied. "Fade was, I'm not sure how, and I pulled him through." Speaking of Fade, he'd gone and slumped against a greasy wall near a dumpster. A glassy stare sent skyward, hands hanging limp. With most of his gear still on him, Fade's lounge had an ominous feel. But Thalia could sympathize. Her arsenal dragged on her back and legs. If any police officer happened to wander this way, there'd be hard questions. "Then he's still there." Eve walked near Fade, wavered as if she was about to sit down too, then straightened. "Likely dead." She set her machine pistol down, looked towards the alley's mouth. "I need some sleep." "Sleep?" Thalia asked. "Now?" "We just fought our way home, and you want to go to bed?" "Haven't slept in almost 2 days." My head's pounding. Eve rubbed her forehead, continuing to look out towards the street. "We tried to end this fast. We failed. It's a real war now." "One you said we can't win." "We won't. The gardener might toy with us for a while, but if we don't collapse like it wants, it'll erase our planet. It's inevitable." "Not a great attitude, Eve." "It's not attitude, it's fact. Now I'm going to take a nap." "Where?" Fade asked, piping up and flicking his eyes her way. "Don't forget, we've enemies here too." Navarro and Pline might have disappeared, but their cronies might think we're in on it. "My place," Thalia said. "They'll be on your house, Fade." "Your hotel's probably marked, Eve. Nobody gives a damn about my apartment." "You have a bed?" Eve asked. "No, no bed. Of course I have a bed. What do you think I am? Insane?" "You fired a rocket at the most powerful being in the universe." Insane applies. Thalia's apartment did, in fact, have a bed. A couch, too. And 3 pictures on the walls, framed bits from Thalia's distant past when she still had parents and did normal things like graduate high school, go on vacation, and have drinks with friends. They'd ditched most of the weapons back in the alley, then walked a few blocks until a whacked-out gig driver, one who went on and on about the end of the world but still wanted to hustle for a few bucks, took them to Thalia's place. Eve had passed out on the way, managed to stumble into Thalia's bedroom, and collapsed. Fade had returned to his glassy stare, this time moving the vacant gaze to Thalia's slim 4th-floor balcony overlooking a reasonably nice, complex courtyard. Thalia put on coffee, grabbed a couple of protein bars, and met him at the railing. "Total failure," Fade said, accepting the bar. "What a disaster that was. Didn't get Jaycee back, didn't even see where she went, and Ezra's gone." The FBI agent's disappearance would cause some predictable problems, namely that Mayra, his partner, knew who Ezra had been with when he was last on this earth. They'd be suspects, and, worse, find themselves without access to Ezra's pull. The man seemed to believe them, and might have been able to get an arsenal on board for what, exactly? Another invasion? How many people would it take to assault the Grove? Thalia wondered between bar bites. A few thousand? It's not a number. The gardener could have killed us if it wanted, Thalia. The grove's its domain. We might have physical laws here, but there, it can do anything. Then why didn't it? I'm thinking mind games. Control. Keep the Rakers under its influence. Thalia snorted. By making them eradicate other species? By threatening them with the worst if they don't. It's the same thing here. You cross the line for your boss, say. Take a life, commit a crime, whatever. Now you're tied to them, and you need their approval to justify your actions. That's putting a human spin on species we don't know or understand, Fade. Hard to say what drives a plant monster or a giant blob. Well, they must want what the gardener's promising, or why would they be attacking us? How about fear? Veronica conceded it was difficult to tell time when floating in a void, but she figured a fourth sprint through memories, good and bad, choices made and regretted, would well and truly drive her insane. It had felt like forever, and it was time to leave. The gardener's little airborne magic had her feeling physically great. Even the would-be problems like food and what came after wicked away, devoured by the tiny designs to leave Veronica fresh. Almost too perfect. The same could be said of the other creatures. Some shivered, flailed, or made odd noises, but most hung about in motionless stupor. Their colors, whether red, blue, orange, or a mix of them all, were bright and healthy. Their minds might be broken, as Veronica's surely would be after another few days in this hell. Then again, what did sanity matter if, as Veronica suspected, they were being preserved for their genetic material? If, when the gardener so desired, humans could get another run at it. How easy it would be to sink into that same malaise. She'd been close wandering with Daffodil, Veronica's old life already blown to bits. Lost, far outside the reality she'd known, Veronica could slide into the psychic abyss. It had a certain appeal, turfing off all responsibility and setting aside ambition, objectives, concern for her friends, and literally anything she enjoyed doing to just drift. But Christopher Pline, flawed father that he was, did not countenance such attitudes among his children. What started as dismal apathy forged through growing frustration into resolve. The gardener had stuffed Veronica in here, and getting out was a puzzle. One she had, apparently, all eternity to solve. Finding a new goal woke her up. Escape meant first figuring out just what this place was. How did it function? What could one do inside it? And what were its weaknesses? Waving her arms and legs brought Veronica nothing. But perhaps that wasn't quite true. Zero gravity seemed to be the thing, but moving in an empty space wasn't impossible. She just needed something to push against. No walls, no floors, but Veronica did have her body, did have her clothes, did have, thanks to the gardener's miracles, an endless supply of good health. She sucked out some saliva, pooled it in her mouth, and gave a strong spit. Not exactly a skill she'd honed over the years, but Veronica's little glob shot away from her until the infested air tore it apart to nothing. Veronica did it again, and a third, then a fourth time. Her only visual markers were the other creatures, and they showed Veronica's spit method wasn't making progress. But she had something better. Bending, Veronica pulled off the sneakers she'd worn to Navarro's enclave, figuring she might need to run. Holding the blue and white shoe in her hand, Veronica pulled back and let fly. Her arm whipped ahead and to the left as she threw. She spun, wheeling around, but also went backward. Clear motion, and clearly not stopping. She was moving, and spinning enough to make her sick enough to... The vomit was disgusting, but it slowed the spin. Added to the growing proof Veronica had figured out how to navigate this strange place. Now that she could move, albeit slowly, it was time to find some friends. Bonus! The Grove's microscopic robots cleaned her up. Letters, numbers, basic body parts. Jaycee was exhausted, but they'd only been at this for a few hours. Getting back home to her dad, her friends, what remained of her life might mean getting these Zinwi up to speed on all things human. At least they understood now that Jaycee needed water and food. They were parading random objects before her, waiting for Jaycee to speak, and then write down the names. She'd just described a clock and a bowl, of all things. She'd tried twice to redirect to the Rakers, to the Grove, and a way back, but had met only puzzlement. But then, that made sense, didn't it? Nobody on Earth knew about the Rakers, so why would they hear? What hope would she have of making it home? The thought had her sitting down on the cold rock while the Zinwi rummaged for more random objects. There was no chance, was there? Jaycee would spend the rest of her, probably short, life here. Answering questions, getting poked and prodded, and when she died, they'd cut her open to see what was inside. A grotesque unboxing. She cried, of course, because Jaycee had long adopted the theory that good tears made bad things easier to take. When this, too, drew the Zinwi's attention back to her, when they brightened the lights and made their inquisitive noises, Jaycee only cried harder. Apparently recognizing distress, the Zinwi came in with more water, brought more bland mush, and rushed about behind their window. Until, as she held herself, one ventured in with something different, something new. A blanket, fashioned with coarse cloth not far off from sandpaper. A dull red color, the Zinwi draped it over Jaycee's shoulders, and with a gentleness belying the thing's big hands, smoothed it out around her. The Zinwi's warm breath touched Jaycee at the same time. Her loneliness didn't disappear, but the despair withered at the shock. "Thank you," Jaycee said, turning up to the big creature. The creature huffed its nostrils, but the concern in its eyes was plain enough. Jaycee was in a mess, true, but maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe she could find a way out, if these creatures were willing to listen. They'd need to get past the objects and random words, though. They needed direction. Brushing away the tears, Jaycee stood. Went to the window as the Zinwi watched her. She kept the blanket pulled around, it was a little cold in here, and tapped on the glass, towards the big door on the left. Then, she tapped her own chest and pointed up. She'd show these things where she came in, and together they might find the Raker who'd opened the portal. And with that Zinwi's help, Jaycee might finally get home. Mayra noticed the changes at the same time as everyone else. She remained on the conference call, save for bathroom, coffee, and food delivery breaks. The video link stayed open to a situation room that included a full-on suit swarm. Briefings came and went continually as people at all levels reported out conversations with other governments, counteractions against Raker attacks, and acquired badges from any downed aliens. Murdering the first aliens humanity had ever encountered seemed like a rough way to go, and a directive had been adopted early prompting capture first. A hard thing to achieve when your target, with a little willpower, could blip back to the Grove. Humans, so far as Mayra knew, had yet to nab a single one. Deaths were another story. Whether the gardener was foolish or reckless, once its Rakers lost surprise, they fell without much challenge. Every appearance was noted, mapped, and soon patrolled. Panic turned into puzzlement as humanity analyzed the attacks and found them random, done without strategy. Rakers would stumble into a city and start smashing windows, or warp into a small town and bash a parked car. Within minutes, police, military, or armed locals would counter. Aliens, it turned out, died just as easily to a bullet as a human, which turned the council into a befuddled bunch. They bandied about theories and came to no conclusion. Killed Rakers were hustled to labs for autopsies, while their badges, those little jewels, were theoretically being taken to a central point. A neutral spot in Brussels, though Mera and everyone else figured if even half the badges made it there, it'd be a miracle. No nation would give up all their chances at breaking the badge's mystery. Yet, amid all that chaos, a trend emerged. The attacks were already starting to decline. Fewer calls, fewer assaults. As if an opening wave had crashed and an eerie calm followed. "What's happening?" came the question from Mera and everyone else. "Maybe we've killed or wounded them all," floated an official. "Can't," replied another. "No way they assumed a few hundred could take down a planet of billions. Even with their tricks, not a chance. Then what? A second wave?" Mera, remembering Eve, spoke up for the first time in hours. "They're changing tactics. Panic isn't working, so they're going to try something different." That set off more speculation. Political assassinations, sensitive infrastructure, attempts to gain control of nuclear weapons. All possibilities, but Mera dismissed each one fast with a simple, single argument. "They don't understand us," Mera said after several others had listed off the options. "They wouldn't know how to launch our nuclear strikes if they made it to the computers. They wouldn't know where or who most of our leaders are. Taking out our infrastructure assumes they know how it works. These are aliens. These are creatures so different from us that they'll have no idea how to hurt us, and us them." Mera realized, then, that she had the attention of everyone in the other room, on linked calls from all over the world. Intimidating, but if she could face down a monster, then she could do this. "I think they were playing. Now, they're going to erase us." Eve had said that was the final step. If the Rakers themselves couldn't break a civilization, the Gardener would wipe the planet. How, Mera didn't know, but letting it try was a mistake. "Then we attack," Mera said in answer to the obvious question. "Don't give them time. We have badges. We go." Eve had no clothes, no luggage, save what she carried on her person. She had an apartment on the East Coast in a small town, with cheap rent and no questions. That had been Lode's advice. Quiet spots, few possessions. Rakers didn't have time to accumulate, didn't have a need for the drag things create on a life. She'd sold almost everything after joining up, a detachment made easy because Eve had lived the sort of life ideal for a Raker. Already on the move, no family, and flexible morals. The last laws had been reforged in Lode's dire crucible, and they took a beating as Eve dozed in Thalia's bed. Do good, help others, make the world a better place were good starters soon torn apart by subjective subservience. Eve wasn't there to make judgments, but to obey the audience, and in turn, the Gardener's path to what it considered greatness. Accepting that took time. Realizing there wasn't an alternative took even longer. Her phone, battered and barely holding a charge after the slog from kidnapping to grove assault and back, Thalia's model, in a stroke of luck, matched hers, making charging possible, buzzed. Not many had the number, and the one blinking up now wasn't one she knew. "We're going in," said the voice on the other end, Mera's at the outset. Where and who were obvious enough. Why Mera was calling wasn't hard to discern either. "Don't," Eve said. "You'll all die and you won't achieve anything." "Not asking that. We're hoping you'll lead us in." "I just said it was a suicide mission and now you're asking me to lead it?" "We're on track to have about 10 badges. Holding hands like you've all done, that makes a team as big as 30. Mera hesitated. "The attacks are slowing, Eve. Nobody here thinks we've given the Gardener a change of heart. You said it'd just get worse. We want to stop that." "Too late." We went and talked to it. The Gardener likes Earth. It wants us gone. Unless you have a rocket that we're all getting on, the Gardener's going to find a way to clean us off or if it gets annoyed, turn us to dust. My bosses aren't big on lying down and dying. Didn't think you were either. You have any family, Mara? Siblings, parents, a partner? How's that relevant? Go spend some time with them. Give them some love. Because what's coming isn't getting stopped. Not by your special forces, not by God, not by the president. Is that what you're doing, Eve? Giving up? I'm going to bed, Mara. If Earth's still here when I wake up, I'll give you a call. Lode might have been proud of that one. Rude, threatening, and dangerous all in one. Eve stared at the ceiling. He was dead now, if Fade was right. A man she'd spent decades with, jumping all over this planet, buying into a flawed mission because it was the best they had. After all that, then, Eve had nothing. An angry would-be deity and humanity about to be wiped because of it. And why? Because the gardener was annoyed a few random humans had stumbled into its little world? Sounded childish, but then, so did most of human mythology. Petulant gods doing their followers wrong for the slightest mistakes. Knowing this one would slaughter everything and everyone Eve had ever known, hit a bit different. For a minute, Eve wondered if she'd be able to fall asleep. She needn't have worried. Exhaustion hit like a hammer to the head, sent her spinning into dreamland. Her phone, charging, sat on the nightstand. Fade kicked the tires again and again on Thalia's balcony, every time getting to the same sticking point. He'd already written off Earth, Oakland, and the superhero complex that had had him taking Eve's offer to be a Raker in the first place. Leaning on the railing with Thalia, their numbing chat inevitably bleeding back to the past and decisions made, good times and bad times, Fade centered on what mattered most. Jaycee. You're still not finding a way to her, Thalia said, falling easily, as she so often did, into the counter. Take your badge, warp to the grove, sneak or stab your way into past every single enemy, and then what? Ask nicely. For security camera footage? The gardener will know. Fade ended the line with curse. Okay, what about the audience? It shows what we ask. Generally, anyway. You think it's Snow White's magic mirror? Oh, audience, show me Jaycee wherever she may be. Nice rhyme, and no. Fade drummed fingers on the railing, warming up in the sun. A faint smoke drift still rose from downtown and the bay to the west, the Raker attack's last line. I mean, maybe. That'd be cool, but it might get me where the portal was when she left. Putting a lot of hope on that table, which I'm sure all the aliens in the grove will just let you use. You're not being helpful. Shooting down bad ideas is helpful. Put the artillery away and offer up something better. Thalia grimaced. That's what I'm trying to tell you, Fade. I think we have to wait for an opening. See what the gardener tries to do, then block it, and maybe take advantage. Notch a win, and then press. While Jaycee rots somewhere? You don't know if she's rotting. She might be having a fabulous party on some world where everything's ice cream and lollipops. Fade blinked at her. Thalia shrugged. Her phone rang, and her expression upon catching the caller had Fade paying attention. She answered. Listened. I think, Thalia said after a minute, that he'll say yes. She flicked a slight grin Fade's way. In fact, I know he will. Mara's instructions had Fade in Thalia's car 10 minutes later, cruising towards a private airfield. They'd be meeting Mara there, then skipping away in a fast plane to staging base not all that far away. There'd been a breakthrough, an international agreement. In 3 hours, Earth, with all the badges it had found, would be take the fight to the grove. And Fade would be leading it. At least until he figured out how to find Jaycee. Chapter 15. Bonding in the Void. The airfield drive offered what drives had provided for so long: a chance to simmer, reflect, and decide just what Thalia was going to do. Her head ached, her muscles were sore, and sleep's lack hammered her every motion, despite the endless energy drinks both she and Fade drained like water. She'd be paying for the last 36 hours with years of her life, which, if the gardener won, wouldn't be all that much longer. Fade joined her in silence all the way to the airfield's gate. He gazed out the front windshield, withdrawn and pensive, a look Thalia had seen on him plenty, and which he'd probably seen her wear enough times too. Jaycee wasn't her daughter by blood, but Thalia would do anything for the girl. But what could either of them do now? No training prepped for a disappearance to a world half a galaxy away, if that's where these Rakers lived. Then again, even if they were underground Martians, it's not like they could send a rocket to pick Jaycee up and bring her back. No, the only rescue lay through the way Jaycee went, a path blocked by an all-powerful alien with a grudge against humanity. "You're not coming?" Fade asked as he left the car, slinging a fresh pack over his shoulder. Water bottle, protein bar, more energy drinks, and a spare set of combat knives Thalia kept at her place. What more did a man need? "Seriously, for this?" Thalia leaned over the steering wheel, gave Fade the raised eyebrow move. "You're about to join the world's deadliest killers, the best special forces we have. Don't think you'll need me." "You know that's not true. Trust is everything here." "Then trust me," Thalia grinned. "Besides, it's not like I don't have a better idea. You go in with all those guns, I'll do things my way." "What way's that?" "The smart one." Thalia shifted the car into gear. "Don't die, Fade." You too?" Thalia caught Fade staring after her in the rearview mirror, on the long, lazy road away from the airfield. Thalia needed a nap, but a look at all the empty caffeine cans in the cup holders said that would be hard to get. She'd told Fade she had a better idea. Now, Thalia just had to find one. Veronica had a pick of nightmares and chose the scariest one she could see. Whether it was a nihilistic urge to get carved up as an escape from the gardener's purgatory, or a desire to find the deadliest potential ally, Veronica whipped her way towards a nightmare beast. Far taller than her, sporting huge clawed legs and nasty, spindly limbs, the creature drifted like everything else in the gardener's floating prison. It seemed awake, blinking slow yellow eyelids at Veronica as she waved and spat to preserve her shoe-fling momentum. Her progress through the creamy ether was both unceasing and crawling, a combination that sparked hope and let her grind through possibilities. She had no tools, no way of knowing how to escape the gardener's strange prison, but who knew what the other creatures might be able to do, or what, with their combined gaggle, they might discover. That any of these aliens might decide snacking on Veronica could be a good distraction from the eternal ennui also lingered, but she brushed that aside. Doom and gloom wouldn't get her anywhere. She rotated as she approached the creature, having practiced her spit flight for several hours now, long enough to consider herself an expert, long enough to plant the target right between her arms. A grab-and-go mission, because slowing momentum here wasn't worth it. Veronica only had one shoe left to launch. The creature stopped blinking as Veronica reached it, those eyes bulging out further. Up close, she noticed metal scraps blending in with its skin, small silver plates and aluminum streaks, odd red and silver wires collecting between its limbs. The clawed feet kicked at nothing, but she noticed shimmering slime erupt all across the creature's skin. No stranger to nature documentaries, ideal background entertainment when reviewing practice tests for the 50th time. Veronica pulled her arms back in. Should she abandon this one? Keep on floating? The next alien wasn't too far away, but as Veronica twisted around the slime-coated body, she made a different call. This wasn't the time for caution. She needed allies, numbers, and possibilities. She pulled off the jacket she'd worn to the meeting with Navarro, flipped the sleeves, and grabbed one of the alien's arms with both covered hands. The slime, thankfully, wasn't acid, and Veronica found herself face to face with 3 eyes. No limb had yet tried to rend her apart, a positive sign. "Hey there," she said. "What are you?" The creature had an answer. Torture was untrustworthy. Daffodil confirmed that truth to Ezra as the she drew a line in the air before them both. Like a gash spreading wide, the split replaced the dark shadows and white stone with something altogether familiar. A gray box, complete with a chair in the center. Far from a basic wood seat, the chair looked more like one Ezra might find at a dentist's office, bristling with appendages. Daffodil put a hand on Ezra's back and pushed him through the slit, saying he ought to take a seat. "It's too late now," Daffodil continued, as she stepped through after him. "Even if, seeing this, you want to change your mind, I can't trust what you'd tell me." "So you said," Ezra replied, following her instructions and taking a slow spin to set himself in the chair. The soft cushion shivered as Ezra landed in it, what he took for a bounce revealing itself to be something else entirely. A molding. In fact, the whole chair warped around him, arm rests rising out from the base and expanding to match his limbs. The headrest folded around his neck, giving Ezra a cozier fit than any chair he'd ever used before. A footrest kicked up and swept his feet off the floor. Trapped, but then he'd been equally so before with Daffodil. At least this felt like he floated on cotton. A gentle current washed across his skin, too, like a low fan was blowing. And was that lilac on the air? "As I said," Daffodil, watching the chair mold, "torture is inconclusive. It hurts, too, the morale of the torturer, unless you're truly sadistic, in which case we don't want you around anyway. Extracting truth from people who don't want to give it used to be a problem, plagued us for millennia, until we solved it by accident." "Accident?" Daffodil tapped her skull. "Most intelligent life functions through a brain. They don't always look like yours, and I assure you, seeing mine would shake you to your core, but the idea remains the same. Neurons, synapses, stored data. The problem, though, arises when life extends beyond its intended duration. The cup overflows. Too much, and you lose it. So it was eternal life, or close enough as to make the distinction pointless and insanity. A damper on the spirits of our civilization, when we'd thought we'd at last shaken off death's cold chains. But we are nothing if not enterprising, and so we set about solving the problem." "You sure about that?" "Because you're sounding a little insane to me. Subjective. Nevertheless, we learned to treat the brain like a computer, a download, if you will, of everything stored among those brilliant nerves. A regular medical checkup, then. Archive the bits not necessary, the pointless memories or useless skills, and on you go, ready to continue your eternal bliss." Daffodil walked alongside Ezra's chair, over near his face, and grinned. "Do you know what you can't do with a downloaded memory? With knowledge removed from the host? Guessing you're about to tell me?" Daffodil nodded. "You can't hide it, Ezra. It's there, plain, simple. So that's what we're going to do. Extract, review, and determine how best to annihilate your species without destroying your home. I hope it's there too, because if it's not, then we'll have to do things the messy way." "You're going to strip my mind?" "Exactly. Unfortunately, so far, I've yet to find a species that takes to our methods as well as we do. Death is the usual outcome, but then, we both know that's where this was going anyway." Daffodil touched something on the chair's side, and those comfy armrests molded around Ezra's arms in a vise. The neck wrap expanded, closed around his throat. Even the footrest let his ankles sink into the cushion before sliding up and closing around them. I take no pleasure in this, you know. It's a job, a function. As the steward of the galaxy's hopes, I have to do the dirtier work every now and then. She stepped away, the grin fading to a line. You might want to close your eyes. I think it's easier to slip away when you're not seeing what's about to happen. Ezra tugged at both arms, his feet, even tried jerking his head free. No give, though the pressure never seemed too much to cause pain. A soft buzzing noise began behind his ear. A green laser line ran up and down his body. It's taking your measurement so the implant sticks at the right point, Daffodil said, then snapped her head off to the left, glaring at nothing. She growled like an animal before dropping to a sigh. Apologies, Ezra. You will die alone, and for that I am sorry. I meant this to be kinder. Your species are barbarians. She slashed her hand before her, opening another slit. With a shaking head, Daffodil, the gardener, stepped through and vanished. Left Ezra to the growing buzz, a new cold weight on his head, and an empty panic. The government, any government, had been best avoided for Fade's professional life. He operated on the rough side, where paperwork swapped for a punching fist or a threatening message best delivered by bat. Being a Raker hadn't changed that, as answering questions about his ability to, more or less, teleport around the planet seemed like a bad time. So Fade kept his head on a swivel as he met Mayra by the military plane at the private airfield. A fat gray transport, engines already spinning up as he approached. Mayra looked much the same as Fade, though he noticed she'd managed, like him, to snag a shower and a change of clothes. Thick jacket and jeans, body armor already on. Sidearm holstered at her waist. You my escort to this dance? Mayra nodded. Ezra's still missing. With him gone, you're stuck with me. You sure it's not the other way around? Not at all. No Thalia? She's calling it an early night. Mayra gave him a soft sniff, then waved Fade on. The plane was mostly empty, save some cargo crates netted down and going to their same way. 2 pilots sat at the controls, sipping beverages and not saying a word. Benches set against the plane's sides offered belted seating, and Fade fumbled his way through one, drawing a judging look from Mayra. I thought you were good at this, she asked when Fade had himself sorted, the agent sitting across from him. The plane's door shut as she spoke, those engines kicking into another gear. Lots of experience fighting the bad guys? Bad guys? What? Did we step out of a Saturday morning cartoon? You know what I mean. Nothing I did put me on a plane like this. Kept you off of our radar too, Mayra said. An empty record. Not even a speeding ticket. I'm a regular angel. Then where's my partner? Fade eyed her. She hadn't been in the grove, hadn't witnessed the flight and Fade's swap. No way she could know, but Mayra had a killer's look. The unbending resolve you needed to take a life or save a million. Dangerous to lie to someone like that, but shading the truth? The gardener took him, Fade said. It was chaotic. The Rakers didn't want to get hurt, right? So they kept their distance. Ezra didn't go fast enough. He's in better shape than you. Not sure Fade believed that, but arguing fitness wasn't the play here. Look, in that place it's different from anything you've ever imagined. Ezra was overwhelmed, and that's not his fault. Well, we're about to back there and get him, with a lot more guns and a lot more people, so you'd better figure out how to keep us alive. Already working on that. The plane shot aloft, a rickety ride without the free headphones, pleasant pilot coming over the intercom, or a promise of in-flight snacks. Instead, according to Mayra, they'd be coasting south for a couple hours. An isolated base in New Mexico, surrounded by desert. Other countries would be assembling their own teams, and Fade would, simultaneously, teach a bunch of soldiers all over the world how to invade the Grove. Just, launching an attack on the single most powerful entity in the universe. No sweat. Keep in mind, Mara said, that you only need to get us there. These teams, they're the best. They won't need your help inside unless something's strange. This isn't a... It is. The setting's different, but the job's the same as any other assassination. Neutralize enemies, take out the target by any means necessary. Fade shook his head. You parroting that line, or do you honestly believe it? I have to. Otherwise we're all going to die, right? You tell me. What's the most likely scenario? A few dozen commandos defeat a creature that's survived for longer than humanity's existed, that has the power to crisscross the galaxy at will? Or it gets annoyed and decides we're a stain better wiped away than left to linger? Mara didn't flinch. I think, Fade, the gardener doesn't know what it's up against. Eve answered the bedroom door after a third knock, having apparently fallen back asleep after Thalia's call. Disheveled didn't do the Raker justice, with bags beneath her bloodshot eyes, hair sprawling everywhere, and a sideways lean as if Eve could barely manage to stand. Did you get plastered? Thalia asked, holding forth a coffee. She had one for herself, and a third, empty one in the car. This would all catch up to her eventually, but if the world ended first, who cared? I need my sleep, Eve replied, voice low and scratched. Haven't had enough. Can't imagine why. Eve looked past Thalia, narrowed her eyes at nothing. No Fade? Secret mission. Invading the Grove with a bunch of gun-toting killers? Thalia gave Eve a once-over, pulled open the blinds, and winced at both the light and view of a neighboring building. Figure it'll end in disaster like ours did, but what choice do we have? Eve sat on the bed, sipped the coffee, and made a face. I prefer tea. And I prefer a nice workout, a warm shower, and an evening in pajamas watching old sitcom reruns. This isn't the time to be picky. It's not picky, it's a preference. Eve, if you don't want this coffee all over you, then get yourself together. I was. A few minutes ago, underneath those covers. Thalia folded her arms, leaned against the wall. You always an asshole after you wake up? That fought up a smile. Eve took another, longer sip of her coffee, which killed it, but not the moment. I suppose I'm a little sour. Easy to be, considering. That's why I'm here. Oh, I thought it was to check up on a friend. Look at you, joking. Love to see it. You and Fade always are. Figured I should learn. It's our coping mechanism. But speaking of Fade, he's going to fail, right? Eve gave a half-hearted shrug. Who knows? We aren't the first ones to fight the gardener, and all the others have failed. But humans are crazy, so... Question mark. Okay, well, what's the backup plan if crazy doesn't cut it? Shouldn't you be asking the military? The UN? Oh yeah, silly me. I'll just dial them up right now. Thalia pulled out her phone, set it on the plain white nightstand. See, Eve, the last couple of days have been one desperate play after another. Fade likes to roll with that. I don't, and I don't think you do either, but you just cashed out for a few hours, which tells me we're either so screwed nothing matters, or you think we have time. Thalia spun the phone around with one hand. The first one doesn't give me any options, so I'm hoping it's number 2. The gardener already gave us the answer. It wants to preserve the planet, at least for now. If that's the goal, we'll have time. It's not magical. It can't snap its fingers like a fairy tale and make us disappear. Eve stood up, started pacing. I've seen one cleansing, Thalia, and it happened in stages. First, the panic attacks. Rakers appearing and destroying. We stopped that fast, because humans aren't wielding sticks and stones. Next comes analysis and the bigger moves. It'll look for ways to destroy us while keeping Earth intact. So, no nukes? No asteroid impacts? I'm not sure. What I saw was a targeted breach, destabilized the planet's core and ravaged its surface. The species died, the world survived. At least in some fashion. Okay, so yes, nukes. Maybe a plague? Eve shook her head. Too much time. The gardener plays over eons, but when it decides to move, it moves fast. I don't think it'll use nuclear weapons, even if it could get them launched. It doesn't want to reduce us, Thalia. It's elimination, every last one. Good luck with that. We're like cockroaches. Eve stopped, tapped her chin. Cockroaches. That's a good one. You're not laughing. Thinking, instead. Eve turned, pointed to Thalia. No, not to Thalia. To her phone. That's it. Our devices are everywhere. I mean, not everywhere. They take the damn things away at summer camps and stuff. Close enough. The Rakers can mop up. Thalia picked up the phone, looked at it. A lot of people try to turn these into bombs, Eve. Some succeeded, but those were made ahead of time. I don't. It's the start. Break us down. Do what the Raker attacks couldn't. Then clean us out. Eve flicked her eyes to the sky, or rather the popcorn ceiling. The audience is already in our networks. It can get the access the gardener wants. Then, Eve, if you're right, if the two of us spitballing in my bedroom after way too little sleep have guessed the doomsday plan, what are we going to do about it? Eve gave a dismal laugh. I have no idea. Smell, dust, pollen, whatever you wanted to call it. The mottled metal alien sent its messages as the secretions dried, breaking off into powders as Veronica held it and coasted through the creamy void. If she'd been back on Earth, without the Grove's enhancements, Veronica figured she wouldn't have a clue what the spicy series meant. But here, every sniff brought a clear meaning. Calmalites were the species, and this one's name was far too long to spell out, a series of syllables that Veronica lost track of between the first and last. Orby, she said in reply, that's what I'm going to call you. I know it's not fancy, and I know it's not your real name, but let's spare us both the embarrassment of my trying to pronounce that. Orby let a new, slimy wave wash out, and a minute later, as they drifted towards the next creature, Veronica caught its agreement. Beyond its species and name, Orby's tale was sad and short. The gardener had appeared on the marshy morass of their home planet, recruited a couple of Rakers in secret, and then decided, after a variety of awful experiments, that Orby and its pals would never hit the intellectual marks the gardener was looking for. Wait, you didn't do anything wrong? It just decided you weren't good enough? Not good enough, and never would be. Instead, the gardener locked Orby away here and swept the others away. So far as Orby knew, its planet had been repopulated with something new, or it waited there, teeming without civilized life, waiting for a new chance. That's so evil, Orby commiserated, and Veronica looked ahead towards the next strange creature. An elongated back of brown fuzz and limbs, one long slit eye blinking as they drew near. All of these were species the gardener had cast away. Rejects, but not for defiance, like humans. Arbitrary failures damned to this. Unfortunately, when she asked, Orby had no idea how to leave. It had been stuck amid the void for too long to tell. Would their next encounter, guided to by Orby's flailing limbs and Veronica's flinging shoe, have a better idea? She didn't have much hope. Didn't until a line split the endless pale. A seam, and, on the other side, stepping through, came the gardener. Came Daffodil. The master of this living mausoleum drifted to intercept, limbs akimbo and a furrowed brow signaling they were not amused. Behind, the cut slit crackled, showing a slate sterile gray beyond. "This is not appropriate," Daffodil announced, careening right at them. "Species cannot intermingle. Your touch could be fatal to one another. Think, Veronica. You might destroy the last Calmalite. She might, and part of her would regret such a thing. What she wouldn't regret, was an escape. Not what she'd planned, not what she'd expected, but capitalizing on an opponent's mistake was the easiest path to victory, or so Christopher Pline had often said on his road to tech domination. So when Daffodil reached them, hands extended towards Orby, Veronica swung the poor creature. A move made possible with gravity's absence. Daffodil caught the big alien, the woman's hands now large, with fingernails as long as knives. They dug into Orby, leaking blue smoke from the creature's back, but its momentum remained, whirling Veronica towards the open slit. The human let go and flew.